All right, Brian Bonilla. We're back.
We're doing this. You thought, if anyone thought that we were done, we're not.
Never. Never. This is no fun. I have people talking about this. I think people only listen to this segment now. So
No, I don't think that's true. But
I think the people that are well established in their career now are really drawn to this. But we still have weekly episodes for the aspiring advertiser. Don't forget those, everybody. But you're crushing it, Brian.
no, dude, this is us, man. You're killing it. We're doing this together. It's great, dude. Yeah, I'm excited for this episode, honestly.
We just got done talking with
Tim Nudd, creativity editor at Ad Age, which you might have heard of.
He's the man. He's good.
He's smart. He's been, around the industry for a long time, and he still loves it. Loves what he does. So, yeah.
Thank God he was here because we talked about two pretty controversial ads, right? And I was nervous, just like learning nervous. So I was pretty quiet, I would say.
No, look, it's hard to talk about controversy, right? You don't want to piss off any brands or whatever, but yeah, like the controversial Apple ad that was just out and Bumble and just like kind of the landscape of controversy that can be, in advertising.
Seriously. I mean, what a treat though. I mean, we had the Drake and Kendrick beef and that Apple Samsung could have been its own little beef there. If Apple would have responded again, maybe they will.
I didn't even think about the two, but
I was thinking about it the whole time.
So fun. Something must be in the air. There must be something going on.
The political election's coming up too, and I think they have debates going on soon. So there's beef, there's battles potentially. Who knows?
But look, it's good to talk about the mistakes just as much as it is to talk about award-winning work, and that's what we were able to do. And I think there's a lot of learning lesson in that.
I think we're going to get a lot of new listeners, Brian. So you want to do another little introduction for all the people tuning into this one?
Yeah, sure. Look, this is episode 7, I want to say, if it's not. Okay. My name is, Brian Bonilla. My agency, senior agency reporter at Ad Age. If you don't know Ad Age, we're the, #1 industry publication that covers advertising specifically. And, we've been doing this for a long time. And this segment is me and you just talking about what are the biggest advertising topics of the past couple of weeks. Every episode, nonstop. And sometimes we have special guests. Sometimes it's us. But this episode, we have a really special guest in Tim Nudd, our creativity editor at Ad Age. And I'm just excited.
Totally. And I am Gino Schellenberger. I work my day job, which goes into the nighttime, is at Havas Chicago. I do new business and comms. But then I also run Breaking Entering, which is the #1 ad podcast out there.
There you go.
So covering advertising. And Brian, has been coming on bi-weekly for the past 6 or 7 weeks now. And no stopping. We're not stopping because we're having fun. And we'll switch it over now. I think that's really it. We usually do a headline of the week and then we do rapid fire, but we want to make sure Tim gets your conversation with Tim, where I chime in awkwardly, gets the most airtime as possible.
No, and and as people may not know, Tim broke the news on the
how cool is that
controversy or the apology.
Apple, and this will be the teaser. Apple sent the official statement exclusively to Tim.
Yeah,
and they haven't apologized in a long time. We'll talk about that. I was thinking, how stressful is that for him? Because he covered the story before the controversy, that was probably covered or looked at a lot in his original writing. And then the controversy hits. I'm sure people read the before and after. So, but he's a pro.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And he's a pro, and you got to be on your feet. And honestly, something like that doesn't come along often. So you got to take advantage, be prepared.
It's good hiring journalists too. I don't understand why more people don't want to be maybe they do, but to be a advertising journalist, it seems really cool. As I'm like a pseudo one that's not even close, but it's good for those people aspiring journalists to learn on how this stuff works on their end.
Yeah. Well, I think journalists in general, like, trade publications, there's a lot of fun stuff to cover, as obviously as everyday consumers, we think about like the typical like news publications, but honestly, there's a lot to cover here, and you talk to people.
What trade would you cover if it wasn't advertising? Then we'll get into it.
It'd probably be like sports, business of some kind.
Nice.
I think that's pretty interesting.
I would do rap beefs. Complex.
Oh, well, is that considered trade?
I don't know. Culture. It's culture.
I wanted to when I was a kid. I work at Complex. But everyone's struggling too, so you got to like manage that. Like who's doing well as a publication. So, but yeah,
everybody's struggling. Quote of the day.
Everyone's struggling. Yeah, right. Apple and Bumble. So
there it is. So we'll now do a whoosh, and it'll go and introduce Tim. Brian, cool. Good work. And Brian, I think our special guest is here. Did we? We kept it a secret the entire time, and here he is. It's Tim Nudd, creativity editor at Ad Age.
I wish there was like an applause sound or something.
Surely you could throw in some stock applause.
Yeah, thanks Tim for coming. Obviously, we've been working together for a bit now, like Ad Age, and you're the man that you're seeing it all. You're seeing all the creativity, and like honestly, I'm in awe sometimes. Just like the amount of like work you churn out, and the amount of like just campaigns you get, like you're seeing on a daily basis. It's like massive,
Oh, thanks. Yeah, sometimes I feel like I see too much.
Do you ever like watch TV or just like?
Yeah, my kids ask me to review the ads when the commercials come on.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, I'm not working right now, guys.
Working overtime.
Well, he watched TV. He was watching the Super Bowl, but he was live streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed most of the Super Bowl kind of. Well, I haven't watched the actual game in years, but I even sort of missed half of the ads this time because I was trying to do the live stream. The live stream was really fun though. It was like a different thing and hadn't done that before, so that was kind of a fresh thing to do.
I was there the whole time.
Thank
you.
People would tune in, and I thought that was really great. I mean, it just shows that there's so much interest for this stuff. Yeah,
for sure.
So, Brian, what are we going to talk about with Tim today? There's been a couple ads making the headlines in the past few weeks. You want to tee us off and talk about the agenda here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a controversial episode. Well, we're focused on controversy anyway. The Apple ad that crushed a lot of people's hopes and dreams, apparently. A lot of people's views of Apple, a lot of, just crushed a lot of ideologies. But I don't know, that crush ad that a lot of people went nuts over, I don't know, like, which I personally I was so surprised about. You've been covering this, since the beginning. It feels like a long time ago. I think it was just last week, right? So
it does feel a long time ago because it was its own saga that had like ups and downs,
I guess like we could start with like, we'll talk a little bit about what the ad is. Obviously, it was about the thinnest, iPad that Apple had ever, and that was promoting that iPad. And what exactly was the controversy? Like, can you just walk me through a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It was a spot that was made in-house. So TBWA, Media Arts Lab, did not have anything to do with this one. They sent it over. There's a lot. Apple makes a lot of spots, right? Like we see them all the time. We get previews of a lot of them too, which is kind of nice. This one, like vast majority of Apple spots, was kind of a product demo. The idea was to push a specific product feature. In this case, the thinness. It's apparently the Apple's thinnest iPad ever. Actually, thinnest product ever. It's even thinner than I think the previous record holder was like the Nano music player from like 10 years ago. Anyway, super, super thin. So I think the idea was, how do we show something really thin? So the idea of crushing stuff down to a really thin dimension was sort of the creative idea. And then you sort of, add to that, like what is the iPad used for? It's used for creative things. If you're an artist or a creator, you can use all these cool creative apps inside the iPad. So the idea was the metaphor was born out of those two things, like all the creative stuff inside the iPad, but then also how thin it was. And that's quite clear how they got to this creative concept, right? So I saw it, I don't know, I think it was at least a few hours before I think it rolled out on YouTube. I saw it, and I actually immediately wondered why they were doing that particular. I didn't anticipate like that it would be so controversial, but I immediately thought like, and I put this in the story originally, I was like, this is kind of violent and it's kind of anti-creativity in a way, like if you're crushing these things. It was, I didn't really put it, it's not like I made it the focus of the story. It wasn't like, it wasn't like I framed the story like, oh, this is going to be a controversial spot, because I didn't realize really that it would be. It was almost like an aside that I put in the story. I think it was like the third paragraph. I was like, kind of weird that this is a little bit violent and a little bit seems like anti-Apple's ethos. And that was a Tuesday, I believe. I can't remember what time of day it came out, but it was definitely a Tuesday. And then, all day Wednesday was just like people like crapping on Apple, crapping on this spot, like really going after it. And I think it gained momentum the more people talked about it. Like it's not the kind of commercial that on its face is like super offensive.
Right.
In fact, I found it interesting that they never took it off social. It's still on their YouTube, and it's still on Tim Cook's X account. So it wasn't like an offensive commercial like we've seen other brands sort of step in it with like political stuff or whatever. But yeah, I mean, obviously in retrospect, I think Apple probably wouldn't have put this out. I think it did. A lot of people took it as big tech kind of crushing the history of human creativity.
Right.
But at the beginning, even though I felt like I saw the inklings of that the first time I watched it, I never thought it would blow up into what it did.
That's interesting. You had that reaction.
You had an inkling. He had an inkling when you first saw it.
Well, you were viewing it as like someone who understands the Apple brand, and obviously the Apple brand has been studied and talked about in universities and all that. And like you're right. I think Apple's known for like clean, simple, right? Beautiful, advertising and just like its products, right? Clean and simple, easy to understand. So I do get that part of it, right? I think like if you're creative in the industry, you're looking at that as like just a complete change, maybe from the brand strategy. But I don't know if they were thinking.
Well, I don't know if it's a change from the strategy, because I think it is a very simple metaphor, right? And the other thing to remember about Apple is like money is kind of no object when it comes to their productions. So this thing is actually a really cool thing to look at when you're looking at it. As if you set aside, like, oh, I'm going to be offended by this. If you actually watch the ad like all the way through, like it's pretty amazing what they did, right? And it was a couple of Iconoclast directors, I think, who put this together for them. But it didn't veer from Apple's strategy of being kind of minimalist. And I mean, it was a big, expensive, flashy production. And what was different was just the sort of the violent nature of it, And after the controversy blew up, then you can go back and with the benefit of hindsight, you can say like, oh, what were they thinking? Like other metaphor seems so obvious, like when you look back at it later. But it's, they clearly, the people who made this within Apple had one metaphor in mind, and they had blinders on.
Right.
And somehow were unable to see this other interpretation, or maybe they saw it and thought, well, no one's going to really get that upset about that. Right. So either they didn't see it at all, or they saw it and were like, well, it's going to be clear to people what we're going for here. So it's not going to become this huge controversy. Obviously they came back to bite them in the end.
Sorry, do you know what you're just saying?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So how long did they keep it up? What was their public statement? Because I saw that kind of circulate on social media.
Yeah, well, so it came out on Tuesday. As I mentioned, the the backlash kind of grew on Wednesday. By Thursday morning, Sabrina Sanchez and I, she's our creativity reporter, we were just talking about it early Thursday, and we were like, the backlash has gotten to a point where we should probably just do another story, just kind of recapping the backlash, or like showing, because I did go in on Wednesday and sort of updated the original post with just a line at the top saying, hey, there's a lot of, the spot's getting a lot of backlash. By Thursday morning, I felt like it deserved its own post, or like a news story. So Sabrina did that. She put together a nice, overview of what people were saying about the spot. We posted that. That was probably 9 or 10 Thursday morning. And then noon or 1, I got a call from Apple saying that they wanted to give us Ad Age a statement exclusively about it. And yeah, I waited probably an hour to get the statement, and then they sent the statement to me, and we quickly did a story, and the statement was essentially, we're sorry. It was an apology, which I wasn't really expecting. I guess when they said they had a statement coming, I wasn't sure what to expect, but the fact that the words "I'm sorry" or "we're sorry" were in there was kind of interesting. So we posted that story. I don't know what time it was, like mid to late afternoon that Thursday. And of course it was, nice to get an exclusive on the apology. Apple doesn't apologize very often. I think I heard someone say it had been, over 10 years since they'd apologized for anything. So they clearly felt bad about sort of alienating the very group that they were trying to appeal to with this. But the apology essentially said, creativity is in our DNA at Apple, and essentially like we want our products to help creators, not we didn't mean to alienate anyone, and I think their phrase was that we missed the mark and we're sorry, was essentially the upshot.
I'd personally I like that personally, because I'm thinking like, as naturally people don't want to watch ads, right? So I thought it was like attention grabbing, and honestly, I don't know if the metaphor was great. Like I understood the metaphor, but like obviously, like we live in a world where like our phones already have everything in them, and so maybe that didn't really resonate with people because it's like, well, our computers and phones already have everything. We don't need like the same metaphor. But I totally I don't know. I thought it was a little overblown personally, especially people that were trying to fix the ad by like rewinding it. I don't know if we still.
Yeah, we talked about that in the office.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Actually, it's interesting. I never thought about that until you just said that. Like the fact of crushing all this stuff into a device, that was true like in 2007 when the iPhone came out. So that's not a new way to promote something, right? It's and then the thinness is kind of I don't know. It's like not a secondary product benefit, but it seems like a kind of a random-ish thing to promote. So like, yeah, I guess, thinking of it more closely, like these are not necessarily two product attributes that are really all that special, I suppose. But then, Apple iterates on its products so much, it's probably hard to find features that are totally new and exciting to, that's what was cool about like do you remember the spot with it promoted the unsend text feature with the lizard who died?
Yeah, I love
that. That was a really cool spot because that was a really new feature.
Right.
And so just, promoting something that it's just a regular iPad, it's just a little thinner. It's probably pretty difficult to put different ideas for how to concept around that.
Well, and maybe that's where that leads to like, you're trying to be so like grandiose and you're not really thinking as much about, what's the exact message that people will receive. You're just like, let's just get the attention. And, I think it was like, take the brand away. It's just like a cool thing to look at. Right. But then once there's the brand, it's like, people are going to have feelings about it. I don't know. I just like, was this just industry folks in your opinion? Cause like, look, my Twitter was like, with just people just having their 2 cents. I know like Fernando Machado like talked about it. I know like a lot of creatives talked about it. But in your opinion, like, was this just kind of in our industry? Because I know we talk to ourselves a lot.
No, I don't think it was just in the industry. First of all, I think anything Apple does reaches the wider culture. And so, after our story posted, the apology story, New York Times picked that up, CNN picked that up, like all the major news outlets reported that Apple apologized. So I think, they not that this spot I don't think it actually had any media buy behind it initially. It was supposed to go on television eventually, but it never made it to TV. But the backlash to it kind of bubbled up, I think, beyond the industry echo chamber in this case. One thing we didn't touch on was the fact that this creative approach actually wasn't new either. LG had made a similar spot about 10, 15 years ago. Also with the press kind of crushing, musical instruments and stuff like down into, so, aside from it being sort of touching a nerve, it also wasn't like particularly original, which I feel like, again, like Apple's usually better than that. They usually do come up with, unique ways to sort of communicate. So maybe that was a sign too that it was a little bit sort of ill-fated.
Yeah. What do you think of the cultural forces? My gut is saying maybe there's with AI potentially replacing or being a big factor, my brain goes to that. Do you guys agree with that? What are maybe some other cultural forces at play here?
I think that's definitely true. I think, we've been covering AI's encroachment on the creative industry, for a while now. It's obviously, that's not necessarily a new thing, but I do think it's coming to a head. The Under Armour commercial from a few months ago was like huge in the industry, and not just at the advertising industry, the creative industry more generally. The other thing I would say is that the culture of outrage kind of took over here as well. Like, I saw like political opinions around this, I heard the word snowflake being thrown around, people talking about like, how could you get so upset about a commercial? So, we're in this age, unfortunately, where, everybody gets upset about everything else, about anything. And then people get upset about other people getting upset. And
election year could be the spark too, maybe.
Yeah. And it fell into sort of the predictable camps, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, there's outrage is sort of a fuel in the attention economy right now. So that definitely played into it.
Yeah.
But, people are legitimately, and for good reason, scared of AI. And this did, in retrospect, seem like, perhaps a metaphor for AI taking away people's and analog creativity. Yeah.
Yeah. Technology, AI.
And to your point earlier, like I saw like Hugh Grant tweeted about it, which I'm just like very random,
I always love to see like the random celebs that come out of the woodwork to like comment on this stuff.
Yeah.
And hilarious.
You were talking about so we've been talking about like Apple, right? And then, quickly, right? There was that Samsung response, right? And like, I didn't expect anything. I thought, maybe this was just going to blow over after a few days. And Samsung had their own response to Apple. Could you explain a little bit how that came to be? I know you broke that story as well. And
what did they say?
What was kind of like, how do you rate the two, if you had to compare?
Yeah. So the Apple, just to give you a chronology, like the Apple spot came out Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, as we're recording this. I think it was 2 weeks ago today. Apologized 2 days later, and then the following Tuesday, so a week after the original ad came out, the Samsung ad came out, and it's essentially it's framed almost like a sequel. Like it takes place on a set where it seems to be the aftermath of the crushing of all the objects. Like there's destroyed creative objects everywhere, and a woman kind of walks in and picks up a guitar that's been heavily damaged and sort of starts to play, and it says creativity cannot be crushed. BBH USA made the spot, which was kind of interesting because BBH London, I think, made the LG spot years ago. Sort of was the original.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a nice kind of full circle moment for BBH on this. Okay. I mean, I didn't think it was like, the most like amazing creative piece of work, but it's almost doesn't have to be. It's almost like just drafting off that, like it made its point. It was pretty nicely made. It was turned around super quick.
Yeah.
From what I understand, I think Thursday or Friday, BBH talked to the client about this. They shot it on Sunday. They had it ready to go. I was talking with BBH about it early in the week, last week, and it took a day or two to get through. Like I think the CEO had to approve it, and there was some legal, stuff to get signed off on. So it could have gone even earlier. Probably could have gone a day earlier because I think it was done. But it kind of harkened back to Samsung's 10, 15 years ago. They were all about attacking Apple all the time. Hadn't seen a good needling of Apple by Samsung in a while, so this was kind of fun to see.
Oh yeah, they had to jump when they apologized and they saw that opportunity. And like you said, it's probably because the relevance and the timeliness of the response, the creativity you said was okay. But
yeah, I was nicely shot, but I don't think it was like something like super special. But they did a nice job of kind of recreating the hydraulic press that had the paint splatters on it, and I'm sure production design wise, it took a lot of skill to get that done.
Totally.
But yeah, it's interesting, right? Because only certain brands are comfortable jumping on another brand failures. Clearly, Samsung is one of those. They have a history of that, so it's kind of in their DNA to kind of crib from the Apple apology. It's in Samsung's DNA to sort of be that challenger against sort of the juggernaut that Apple's become in the mobile space. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was great.
Well, what I thought was good is that it promoted their own product that I probably wouldn't have heard about if I did it. I forgot it was their own version of a tablet. And
okay, I was gonna ask, what was it promoting? Or
it was the product tablet, and she was playing guitar on the tablet. And one, I think that's a big deal for BBH. Samsung works with a lot of agencies to be the agency that gets to do that response. I think it's a big deal. And two, you in that story, you spoke about the in 2011 and 2017, the different types of ads that Samsung had, kind of attacking Apple. And I thought those were funny, right? Because they were talking about the big line at the Apple store and how people look ridiculous waiting for the iPhone when you can just still have the future product, which is Samsung phone. And I thought those were good, but I also thought you were still kind of giving Apple the shine of Apple has these giant lines. People love to wait for Apple, right? Whereas this was a clear mistake that Apple made. They already apologized for it. So it was I think it was different than, years past where you were kind of trying to poke fun of the fact that Apple has a big audience,
Yeah, for sure. I think this was more of just a tactical, hey, let's draft off this mistake and position ourselves as kind of the opposite, as the defenders of creativity. And it definitely got attention. When something is in the zeitgeist so much as this Apple spot was, I did a search a day or two after the Samsung ad broke, and sure enough, it was it was reported on everywhere, this response. So it was smart. You're right though. The Samsung ads from years ago were sort of them trying to put a dent any way they could in the coolness of Apple, and the difference this time was Apple put the dent in themselves, and Samsung just kind of piled on. So I thought that was a good strategy though.
Yeah, but Apple will probably be fine. I think.
We'll have to see what the sales are after all of this.
Too big to fail, of course.
Right.
Listen, the fact that they didn't even take it off the socials, right, indicates to me that they don't feel particularly bad about this.
So they apologized and didn't take it down? It's still up?
It's still up. As far as I know, it was up, many days after the apology. I don't think they felt it's funny because the apology was an apology. It wasn't the fake apology that you often get, which is we're sorry if anyone was offended. Clearly people were offended. So Apple did legitimately apologize, but then they sort of stood behind the work in a weird way by leaving it up. So,
well, I think controversy breeds views just as much as a good ad does, maybe even more so. So I imagine, we got to wait and see, right? And that's the thing about advertising. You have to kind of wait to see the results sometimes. But I think this might have helped them, in a weird way. Because I think a lot of people are learning about that new product because of the controversy. So I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't usually subscribe to the idea that all press is good press. I feel if Apple could go back in time, they absolutely, I think, wouldn't run this if they had known what would have happened. I think it did kind of make them look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it's going to dent their sales, I doubt it. I think people, one of the funniest tweets I saw was someone saying, yeah, everyone's jumping on their iPad or everyone's jumping on their iPhone to express their displeasure, or they're slamming their MacBook shut, when they're after watching the ad. So I think it's one of those brands that's just so, it's almost, the way people feel about it is almost separate from any new piece of work that comes out, because so many people already own these products, and their perception of the products is built on years, sometimes decades of using the products. And I don't, it would be hard to believe, I think, that Apple's going to suffer in any way, like financially, from this.
Yeah.
Shall we switch over to Bumble?
Yeah. To Bumble. Yeah. Like, you were talking earlier about like, this was an interesting case because Apple didn't do anything like politically or otherwise that garnered the controversy. Whereas, there was another controversial around the same time with Bumble that it was, more in the gender politics realm. And if people hadn't seen it, it was these ads that, obviously Bumble is dating app, which, blew up because it allows women to kind of take charge in the dating scene and be the deciders of who they want to, get to date. And, this was a big shift, I thought, in like strategy, because they were, trying to tell women to like get on the dating app, like don't like forget about like celibacy, don't be a nun, right? Like these like trigger kind of phrases, I thought. Can you talk a little bit about like that campaign and how that even compares in the controversy realm?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't cover this campaign. I covered a later campaign that reacted to it, similar to how Samsung reacted to Apple. But we did cover it. Ad Age covered the Bumble work. But yeah, I found that to be way more tone deaf as a brand than the Apple stuff. Like if you're a dating app, you have to understand, gender politics, and you have to understand that telling women, not to embrace celibacy could be a problem. Like there clearly was no sort of recognition of that. So not that, to me, this was a textbook case of really not understanding your audience and how your audience thinks and feels, which is pretty damning when you think about it. Like I think, that's the biggest sort of misstep you can make, is really truly not understanding your audience. I think Apple understands the audience. Apple had a misstep with a metaphor that didn't work quite well. The Bumble thing to me ran a lot deeper, and I find it interesting too that both of these campaigns were made in-house. So there's there are questions to be raised here about, like, if an agency were involved, would that other set of eyes have made a difference in either campaign? I wonder, I wonder if sometimes brands are a little too close to their own communications, and maybe, that they need that sort of temperature check from an outside party. Not that always works. Sometimes agencies introduce the problem. But yeah, the Bumble stuff, I found that to be a pretty serious misstep for a brand who should understand, the space that they're operating in better. Like and I think, you can also, I guess, in similar way to Apple, you can look and see where it came from, right? There's sort of like this empowerment-ish tone to all those headlines, right? Like, oh, we don't, celibacy is not the answer, can be taken as, don't let things limit you. But like the idea that it might not be limiting to choose that. In fact, in an era when reproductive rights are under attack, maybe choosing celibacy is a self-empowerment decision.
Right.
But you could see how maybe they were going for one thing and didn't anticipate the other thing. So I guess that is similar to Apple in a way, but like you said, it's like more in the political realm, which makes it way more, toxic, I think, almost immediately. So I'm not sure. I haven't followed it super closely since it happened, but I think I would worry about Bumble having more fallout and more people deleting Bumble than getting rid of their iPhones.
I think Bumble had like a spike in sales actually that was right before the controversy. So I'm curious, like, what the effect might have, if at all. And to me, the Bumble work felt like a first draft, right? Like a first idea that like maybe you didn't like hone completely, you know?
Yep.
The field work, was that responding to Bumble, or was that?
Definitely. So I have a field is a much smaller. I think it's like a kink and queer friendly dating app. So I wasn't super familiar with them, but they came out with a campaign from Mojo Supermarket a few days later. And it wasn't just a campaign, actually. What Mojo did is they sat down with Field and they said, like, let's add a celibacy feature to the app, where I think within Field you can choose sort of different self-identities. And I think Mojo got them to actually add celibacy as a user profile, which that in itself is interesting. We're not just talking communications here. We're talking about actually changing the product.
Right.
Obviously, they were definitely jumping on the Bumble thing. What I found interesting about the field response, it had a few different elements to it. I think, first of all, they added the feature. Second of all, I think they went to the location where some of the Bumble work was still up, and they actually plastered over it with some field messaging, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then also, I got the sense though that it wasn't like purely tactical. I think Field actually learned something from the conversation that was happening around, the Bumble stuff. Like, I don't like the fact that Field didn't have celibacy as an option. To me, says they hadn't figured it out ahead of time either. And the conversation, happened to be Bumble that kind of stepped in it. And Field, I think, learned from that too, and began to be able to learn a little bit better what their audience, was looking for, or what the entire sort of Gen Z dating community wants out of these apps. So I wouldn't say that like Field had it figured out and was, really lording it over Bumble. I think the whole conversation, kind of probably the whole space, everyone operating in that space, we learned a little bit from that conversation. It just happened to be Bumble that sort of, had the faux pas to begin with.
That's interesting, because we focus so much on that like outrage, not necessarily like the learnings sometimes that come out of a situation like that, if at all. There is just outrage and people walk away. But yeah, sorry, I don't know. Dino, you were gonna say something?
No, I'm just listening. I'm trying to think about, as you guys are discussing, like implications or takeaways for students, aspiring advertisers, how they can learn. I'm just always keeping that lens in the back of my mind. Any kind of key takeaways? Should they go in-house right away? Should they go work at an agency? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Bumble thing, I go back to like, who do you have on your team that really, really deeply understands the space? Like, it's a strategist issue to me. It's like, if you don't understand, why a headline is problematic before you put it out, you haven't done your strategic work, I think, to start with. That strategic work is not always easy. It can often be, I think, even more time consuming than the expression piece, than the actual execution. So, I mean, clearly, and I don't want to, dump on Bumble here either, because obviously the gender space is difficult for everybody to navigate. Like, people have a hard time understanding, I think, a lot of aspects of gender politics in today's world. And in that sense, this controversy hopefully will help in the long run, like the entire category approach things a bit more authentically. As far as like lessons for, aspiring creatives, I mean, maybe one great step would just be like looking at, when you're dealing with stuff like gender politics, when you're looking, in if you're operating in areas that can be dicey, like try to, excavate like what could possibly be taken the wrong way about anything you produce.
Right.
Like let's talk about, this one, like to me, like this headline about celibacy, like the first thing they should have said is, are people going to be offended by this? Like, maybe people want celibacy for certain reasons, or just, just trying to turn it over, turn over a headline like that and try to see it from all points of view. I think they saw it from just one point of view, which is, oh, this sounds like a cool, like empowering kind of attitude to have, without really like going that step beyond that and saying like, how might this be interpreted differently?
And we have to do the same thing, right? Like as journalists, like we when we read a headline or a story, right? You have to think like, well, is this, is this offensive in any way? Or you have to think about like, what's the diversity of like the sources that you're talking to, right? And like, I think that it's also like, what's the diversity of the team that worked? I don't know what the team was like in terms of who worked on the Bumble campaign, but it's not enough to have one or two people, that are diverse, right? So I think, agencies and brands are trying to, become more diverse, but that is another issue in the industry overall. I know when I don't know, when I was in college, I took like a copywriting course at like a healthcare agency, and like it was like they paired us with like aspiring art directors and copywriters, and I was a copywriter. And I remember my first campaign that I wrote, like the CCO at the agency, she was she'd been there a while, and she was like, this is actually offensive to women. And I'm like, I was 18 or 19 or whatever, and I was like, oh, okay. And like that's so crucial, right? To have that. And like, obviously as you get older, you learn more about the world and everything, but you will never fully grasp everyone's point of view, right? It's important to try to like get outside yourself, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, as a journalist too. Like I wrote a story for Ad Age last year, and I won't say what it was about, but I got some response from folks that I'd written about, kind of explaining to me how my phrasing could be a little bit off-putting to a certain community. And that's the thing too, is like there's no way to eradicate these mistakes entirely. Like they're going to happen. Mistakes are going to happen. Out of the thousands and thousands of campaigns produced like every day, someone's going to not see something along the way, and it's going to happen. But it is, I think, learning from it and trying to figure out how to just, be more immersed if you can in like every point of view that in the community that you're trying to target. And yeah, I'm not sure, the whole conversation about in-house versus agency, I think is interesting too. Like if agencies can be that sounding board where if agencies can get more diverse and offer more, perspectives, that can be really valuable to clients. Hopefully that's a learning that clients might take away from this. If you hire diverse agencies, then, you might catch some of these mistakes going forward, hopefully.
They usually make the agencies test the work.
So yeah, but blind spots in testing are like notorious. Like who are you testing the ads, with? And like, I don't know, the whole dynamics of testing. I think the danger there is like you sort of shave off like any sort of specialness as well. That's the danger.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll catch some mistakes, but I think the larger danger with testing is like you end up sort of putting it into a soup that appeals to sort of the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, it definitely whittles away the creativity.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, how we feeling, Brian? I'm glad we had Tim on to kind of navigate these two campaigns, responses by the public, and have his take on it. Are you any other questions for Tim, Brian?
I think it's just interesting to see all this. It made me think about like the Old Spice ads, where like the women were like running towards like one guy. Was that Old Spice? No, Axe.
Axe.
Yeah. And so I remember I was like in high school and I didn't really, think much of it. But as I started covering this industry, I found out that was a very controversial thing, but I didn't cover it, and like, I wanted to give the last question, like, do you feel like these reactions are more immediate than ever before because of social media? Like, I don't know if was it like that, because I know we did a story on all these different controversial ads of past. Is it usually this immediate, or is it becoming more immediate in terms of reactions?
Yeah, I think the advent of Twitter in whenever that was, 2005 or 6, 7, somewhere in there, that definitely put everything into sort of hyperspeed in terms of reaction. But there's cable news often would do segments on advertising in years gone by. It's like media often looks for these things because it is kind of good content. Like we had more engagement on the Apple story than we've had on the story in a while. So we sort of benefit from it in a weird way as well. Not that we make up controversies, but like when a good controversy comes along, people want to talk about it. But yeah, I think it probably is more immediate now, and even more to the point, like it gets really polarized really fast too. Like you get one side versus the other side, and it can be kind of exhausting to cover it. But yeah, looking for any positives you can take out of it if you're a marketer. Yeah, and I guess I would go back to try to institute processes that help you avoid mistakes while not like watering down what you're doing.
Right.
You know.
Right. All right. I think that was it. But Tim, thanks.
All right. Good to be with you guys.
Thanks for coming on.